The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Hear the gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ, according to Matthew.
Glory to you, O Lord.
Jesus said to his disciples, "The kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire labourers for his vineyard. After agreeing with the labourers for the usual daily wage, he sent them into his vineyard. When he went out about 9 o'clock, he saw others standing idle in the marketplace, and he said to them, 'You also go into the vineyard, and I will pay you whatever is right.' So they went. When he went out again about noon and found others still standing there, and 3 o'clock, he did the same. And about 5 o'clock he went out and found others standing around, and he said to them, 'Why are you standing here idle all day?' They said to him, 'Because no one has hired us.' He said to them, 'You also go into the vineyard.' When evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his manager, 'Call the labourers and give them their pay, beginning with the last and then going to the first.' When those hired about 5 o'clock came, each of them received the usual daily wage. Now when the first came, they thought they would receive more, but each of them also received the usual daily wage. And when they received it, they grumbled against the landowner, saying, 'These last worked only 1 hour, and you have made them equal to us who have borne the burden of the day and the scorching heat.' But he replied to one of them, 'Friend, I am doing you no wrong. Did you not agree with me for the usual daily wage? Take what belongs to you and go. I choose to give to this last the same as I give to you. Am I not allowed to do what I choose with what belongs to me? Or are you envious because I am generous? So the last will be first, and the first will be last." This is the gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, O Christ. I must admit I always have a bit of a wan smile on my face when I hear this parable that we've just heard in the gospel, because for many years I worked for a trade union. And I have to admit that I don't think any of my work colleagues would have been persuaded or won over had I shared the teaching of today's gospel with them. The idea of some people working for many, many hours in the heat of the day, and others coming in at the last minute and just putting in very little effort, it seems, but all getting the same reward at the end of it. It just doesn't seem very fair at all on the face of it, even I have to admit. But then, as has been said to me, and no doubt to you on many occasions, who said that life was going to be fair? How many times do we hear children and young adults give the all too familiar cry, "It's not fair," when something happens which seems to them to be the height of injustice and cruelty, usually meaning that they can't do something that they want to do. And mind you, that's a feeling that we've all had to get used to over recent months, I'm sure. And this parable, well, frankly, it does offend our sense of justice as well, because we are accustomed to living and functioning in a world where one's rewards are proportionate to one's service. Although, of course, this does raise the question, especially in the light of recent events with a certain Mr. Bale, of whether a professional footballer or celebrity, quote, is really worth more than the healthcare workers and teachers who we have come to appreciate so much over recent months. Putting ourselves and our own lives into a Bible context, perhaps we would be happy to grant the apostles a larger share than for us, as long as we could expect more than a lesser disciple might receive. We do feel for those all-day workers who receive the same pay as the one-hour workers. Is it really fair? Don't they deserve more? And shouldn't the master have treated them better? There are many similarities to be drawn between this parable and the so familiar one of the prodigal son. In both parables, the grace shown to the undeserving person, the short working labourers, the son who's selfishly gone off and thought nothing of his family, offends those who think of themselves as deserving. In this case, the labourers who've worked all day, in the prodigal of the parable son, the elder brother who was so dutifully plodded on, committing himself to his father's service day in, day out. But of course, there is something about that prodigal son that eventually does steal our hearts and win us over. And when we read the parable, we are glad for the mercy shown to him, and many are equally annoyed and offended by the elderly brother's outrage and lack of understanding of his brother. Because like that elder brother, this parable of the labourers shows us that all of us do perhaps have a tendency to be resentful of what others receive from God. The owner of the vineyard asked those who have worked longest and presumably hardest for him, "Am I not allowed to do what I choose with what belongs to me? Are you envious because I am generous?" Because the point is that God's mercy and grace and forgiveness are God's to give away as God sees fit. And that's a pretty hard lesson for all of us to swallow at times. On another level, of course, the parable is about the first and the last. The parable itself displays a reversal of expectations, finishing with the last will be first and the first will be last, which is also a summary of all New Testament theology and teaching of what Jesus taught the people of his day, his disciples and us. It's a very central and critical part of his teaching. And one thing which I hadn't noticed before I came to look closely at this parable was the flow of the narrative as the workers are compensated for their work. Because when those hired last, about 5 o'clock, they received the daily wage, they were literally paid first. And the first, who had laboured the longest, they have to wait to the very end to get their payments. This scandalous reversal of expectation of our sense of justice is a central teaching of Jesus, as we hear him tell his disciples in Mark chapter 9, "Whoever wants to be first must be last and servant of all." And in Luke 13, Jesus tells the crowds, "Indeed, some are last who will be first, and some are first who will be last." For those who heard Jesus speak these words, and for us hearing them again today, this is an amazing parable and turns all our standards of fair play from a human sense on its head. But that's just it. We are judging by our human standards. But the true scandal of this parable, the thing that really shakes us up, is the realisation that we are all equal recipients of God's gift. But sadly, of course, the true scandal of our faith is that we are often covetous and jealous when God's gifts of forgiveness and life are given to others in equal measure, those who are less deserving, who haven't done as much as others, because, for example, it's just not fair, is it? But it is interesting to note that nobody in this parable was cheated. Not a single worker was underpaid. It was a complaint of those early long-day workers from a response of jealousy. They were not rejoicing in what they had received and in the good that other people had also received. Because we are all today in this world labourers in the vineyard, and the owner of the vineyard, our Lord, deals fairly and equally with all of us. On a personal note, I can equate with those labourers in the vineyard as I can equate with the elder son in the parable of the prodigal son, because for many years I felt that I had not had a wonderful conversion experience in my life. I had not had a marvellous experience, personal experience of God. I believed, yes, but I had not had these wonderful things that I'd heard people having. And you may have heard me tell the story that my mum, many years before I was born, once saw a tree which was not a tree, which showed her for one fleeting moment something of the beauty and glory and wonder that lies just beyond the beauty and glory and wonder of this world. And so I plodded on like the labourers in the vineyard. Oh, one day, maybe not. And then this year, this summer, I had my moment. Just for a fleeting second, I saw a sunset where I saw beyond the veil, where I saw what truly lies just beyond what we can stand, what we can comprehend. But it was a moment when the master of the vineyard gave me a true reward and helped me to go back to that vineyard, to that life of faith, because I knew that it was all true. Many of us may have been blessed from receiving faith in their childhood from their parents and family and carry it in love and service throughout their lives Whereas most of us struggle with doubt and uncertainty, anger and despair, but some people only come to know the Lord very late in their lives, when perhaps they feel that old age or frailty prevent them from being true or effective labourers in the vineyard. But that is not how our Lord sees us. For him, remember, it is not about the time that we put in, it is about the heart that we put in to the time that we have. Amen.